You're welcome to study section 6 of ANA 212 Regional Anatomy. We'll be discussing the heart. The heart is a muscular pump that derives its blood supply through the blood vessels that surround it. Slightly bigger than a fist, this organ is located between the lungs in the center and a bit to the left on the midline of the body. It's like one's owner's fist. The right side of the heart receives poorly oxygenated blood from the body through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava and pumps it through the pulmonary trunk to the lungs for oxygenation. The left side of the heart receives well oxygenated blood from the lungs through the pulmonary veins and pumps it into the aorta for distribution to the body. In this study section, you will be introduced to the location of the and the position of the heart, internal and external anatomy of the heart, tissue layers of the heart, and the conducting system of the heart. On completion of this study section, you should be able to describe the location and position of the heart within the body cavity. You should be able to describe the internal and external anatomy of the heart. You should be able to identify the veins and arteries of the coronary circulation system, and you should be able to describe the conducting system of the heart. Let's start with brief description of the heart. The human heart is located within the thoracic cavity, medially between the lungs in the space known as the mediastinum. As you can see on the slide, that is the mediastinum. The position of the heart within the thoracic cavity, within the mediastinum, the heart is separated from the other mediastinal structure by a tough membrane known as the pericardium or pericardiac sac, and sits in it on space called the pericardial cavity. Shape and size of the heart. The shape of the heart is similar to a pin cone, rather broad as the superior surface and tapering the apex. A typical heart is approximately the size of your own fist, 12 cm in length, 8 cm wide, and 6 cm in thickness. Given the size difference between most members of the sexes, the weight of a female heart is approximately 250 to 300 grams, and the weight of a male heart is approximately 300 to 350 grams. The heart is a well-trained athlete, especially one specializing in aerobic sports. It can be considerably larger than this. Cardiac muscle responds to exercise in a manner similar to that of skeletal muscles. That is, exercise results in the addition of protein myofilaments that increase the size of the individual cells without increasing their numbers, a concept called hypertrophy. Hearts of athletes can pump blood more effectively at lower rates than those of non-athletes, and this is a need for you to always exercise your body to give your heart a healthy look. The heart has 4 chambers. We have the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. The left atrioventricular valve is located between the left atrium and the left ventricle, while the right atrioventricular valve is located between the right atrium and the right ventricle. The pulmonic or semilunar valve is located between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, while the aortic or semilunar valve is located between the left ventricle and the aorta. Let's see the 4 surfaces of the heart. We have the anterior, that is sternocostal surface. which form mainly the right ventricle. We have the diaphragmatic or inferior surface, which form mainly by the left ventricle and partly by the right ventricle. It is related to the central tendon of the diaphragm. Then we have left pulmonary surface, which consists mainly of the left ventricle. It forms the cardiac impression of the left lung. Then we have right pulmonary surface, which form mainly the right atrium, and the blood supply to the heart is through the right and left coronary artery. That is the chambers of the heart you are seeing on the slide. Let's go to venous drainage of the heart. The heart is drained mainly by veins that empty into the coronary sinus, and partly by small veins that empty directly into the chambers of the heart. The coronary sinus, the main vein of the heart, is a wide venous channel that runs from left to right and the posterior part of the coronary groove. The coronary sinus receives the great cardiac vein at its left end and the middle and small cardiac veins at the right end. The left posterior ventricular vein and the left marginal vein also open into the coronary sinus. The small anterior cardiac veins empty directly into the right atrium, and the smallest cardiac vein, that is left ventricle cordis minimi, are minute vessels that begin in the capillary vessels of the myocardium and open directly into the chambers of the heart, chiefly the atria. Although called veins, they are valveless. Communication within the capillary beds of the myocardium, and they may carry blood from the heart chambers to the myocardium. Lymphatic drainage of the heart. Lymphatic vessels in the myocardium and subendocardiac connective tissue pass to the subepicardiac lymphatic pleasures. Vessels from these pleasures pass to the coronary groove and follow the coronary arteries. A single lymphatic vessel formed by the union of various vessels from the heart ascends between the pulmonary trunk and the left atrium and ends in the inferior tracheobronchial lymph nodes, usually on the right side. Innervation of the heart. The heart is supplied by autonomic nerve fibers from superficial and deep cardiac plexuses, that is, the sympathetic stimulation and parasympathetic nerve supply. Conducting system of the heart. The atrioventricular bundle, the only bridge of conduction between the atria and the ventricular myocardium, passes from the atrioventricular nodes through the fibrous skeleton of the heart and along the membranous parts of the IV septum. At the junction of the membranous and muscular parts of the septum, the AV bundle divides into right and left bundle branches. The bundles proceed on each side of the muscular intraventricular bundles, proceed on interventricular to the endocardium and then ramify into subendocardium branches, that is the Purkinje fibers, which extend into the walls of the respective ventricles. The subendocardial branches of the right bundle stimulate the muscle of the IV septum, the anterior papillary muscle through the septomarginal rabecula and the wall of the right ventricle. The subendocardiac branches of the left bundle stimulate the intraventricular nodes, septum, the anterior and posterior papillary muscles, and the wall of the left ventricles. The following is a summary of the conducting system of the heart for your easy understanding. The SA node initiates an impulse that is conducted to cardiac muscle fibers in the atria, causing them to contract. 2. The impulse spread by myogenic conduction, which transmits the impulse from the SA node to the AV node. 3. The signal is distributed from the AV node through the AV bundle and the right and left bundle branches, which pass on each side of the AV septum to supply subendocardial branches to the papillary muscles and the walls of the ventricles. Cardiac circle. The cardiac circle describes the complete movement of the heart or heartbeat and includes the period from the beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next one. The synchronous pumping action of the heart through the AV pumps constitutes the cardiac circle. The arteria are receiving chambers that pump blood into the ventricles, that is the discharging chamber. The right heart is the pump for the pulmonary circuit, while the left heart is the pump for the systemic circuit. The circle begins with a period of ventricular elongation and filling, that is what we term diastole, and ends with a period of ventricular shortening and emptying. It is called systole. 2 heart sounds resulting from valve closures can be heard with a stethoscope. A lump sound as the blood is transferred from the atria to the ventricles, and a dump sound as the ventricles contract and expel blood from the heart. The heart sounds are produced by the snapping shut of the one-way valves that normally keep blood from flowing backward during contraction of the heart. When the ventricle contracts, they produce a wriggling motion. This motion initially ejects the blood from the ventricles, first narrowing and then shortening the heart, reducing the volume of the ventricular chamber. Continuing sequentially, contraction elongates the heart, following the widening of the myocardium briefly relaxes, increasing the volume of the chamber to draw blood from the atria. Thank you for listening. See you in the next class.